starting today with chapter 18. Hopefully between today and Friday we will finish up this chapter and you'll have your test for Friday to take with you. On 6:13 is where we're starting at today, and I like the book's explanation. We can go into deep doo-doo detail here if we wanted to, but in digestion, they describe the entire digestive process as the disassembly line. If you think about it, that's exactly what's happening. We're breaking down food molecules, starting at the mouth all the way through. In fact, you probably have a handout in your notes that deals with digestion. And what it does is take each individual aspect of digestion from the mouth to the esophagus to the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and tells you what the pH is, what's being digested, some of the enzymes. I think that's it, Ron. Is that not it right there?
That's on the back.
Oh, that's it right there. And so, if you're looking at that, the first thing listed on there is the mouth. pH really is no big deal in the mouth. It's a 7. It's a neutral pH. And we're not really breaking down a whole lot of stuff. We're grinding with our teeth, but we have a little bit of salivary amylase. And the salivary amylase is going to start breaking down some carbohydrates. And that's really about it. But the mouth is going to grind this stuff up as much as we can. If we do what we're supposed to do, we should chew our food well, but what do? Chomp, chomp, swallow, take another bite. And we chase that with even a more full component of a product because we didn't grind it down either. So we're throwing whole food molecules in there, hoping the rest of the digestive tract takes care of it, and wonder why it nearly choked us going down. Fast food America, that's what we do. So it's not the healthiest thing. So going down the esophagus, there's really nothing happening here except peristalsis. Peristalsis is mentioned there. Peristalsis is nothing but smooth muscle contractions. They're very slow, moving the food down, and we've all ate that chunk of peanut butter that wish we had something to swallow behind it because it gets stuck up in there sometimes. We make it to the stomach. The stomach's going to continue your carbohydrate digestion, but it's going to start picking up on protein digestion. And it's going to use a lot of acid. It's pepsin works in the presence of low acidity to break down proteins. So protein digestion begins in the stomach. We don't really finish anything here, but we continue carbohydrate. We begin protein digestion. And so when we got finished in the mouth grinding this up, we swallowed it. It was called a bolus. Once we make it to the stomach, and now we're churning a couple of liters of fluid in with this now. We're making a soup out of it. It's a soupy substance that they call chyme. And if you've ever vomited, you've seen it before. It's a nice image for early of the morning, isn't it? So now the stomach's, it's not grinding, it's churning. It's churning all this stuff up, and it then, with a pH of about 2 in the stomach, the small intestine cannot take that kind of pH. So the small intestine will now allow only small amounts of chyme, which is what this soupy substance is called, small amounts of chyme at a time to enter the small intestine. Yeah, just a small rhyme. Kind of time. Semester gets worse as we go, doesn't it? If we just opened the floodgates and the stomach flowed into the first portion of small intestine, the acid in this would just literally eat it up. So allowing small amounts of chyme to come in, we're able to neutralize it with pancreatic bicarbonate. And there's actually some bicarbonate produced in the small intestine. So most digestion and absorption is going to occur in the small intestine. We have 12 to 15 feet of small intestine. There's a lot of surface area here, covered with villi and microvilli for absorption. There's a brush border enzymes that convert other enzymes into their active forms. And if the brush border doesn't produce an enzyme that'll break it down, the pancreas does, and it comes through the pancreatic duct and enters that area, acting on nearly every type of food that we consume right here in the small intestine. So most digestion absorption in the small intestine. Back to the stomach just a little bit. We said we really didn't finish anything off there. We don't even really absorb anything in the stomach, except there's 3 things that we can absorb through the stomach as an adult. Can we name them? As an infant that's 24 or 36 hours old, we can absorb large proteins through the stomach wall that comes from mother's colostrum, or mother's first milk. But after about 48 hours, that's sealed, that's done, that's closed, that's not happening. After that point, there's only 3 things we can absorb through the stomach wall. Alcohol, most common answer from college students. Botulism, yeah, that's not exactly a good thing. And then we need a drug to finish off the alcohol. Aspirin, yeah, that'll work. So aspirin, alcohol, and botulism. Isn't that nice to know? So if you think it's botulism that's making you throw up, it's going to happen pretty fast. It's not something you ate last night that's making you throw up today. If you ate it last night, you're going to have problems last night. Pretty quick. It's not going to mess around very fast at all. All right, so we're in the small intestine. We're absorbing tons of stuff here. We're digesting stuff. Probably the one thing that's hardest to digest is fat, but as things move down the small intestine, we still move by these smooth muscle, wave-like contractions that are still slow, but now it's called segmentation. Is that on that sheet? It's exact same thing as peristalsis, but since it's beyond the stomach, we name it something else. Segmentation. Now we take anything that we've not been able to digest and shove it to the large intestine. There's only a couple things that's happening here, maybe 3 things. We get a little bit of vitamin D production from the bacteria in the large intestine, utilizing food that we couldn't use for anything else. Most of your vitamin D comes from exposure to sunlight. We get a storage capability here, which allows us time to reabsorb more water. This is where our final water reabsorption will occur. Most of it, granted, is absorbed in the small intestine, but what little bit's left will be reabsorbed here in the large intestine. And let's see, what else goes on in the large intestine? Reabsorption of water, vitamin D production, storage of waste. That's it. Is that what's on the list, pretty much? Okay. Then obviously at that point, as storage accumulates, then pressure on the rectum provides the opportunity for defecation, so excretion at that point. So in a nutshell, this sums up really what's going on without throwing out a bunch of enzymes and things, which we're going to go into the chapter now and touch on some of those. So starting on the first page on 613, here's their list of processes. Motility, we've got to get it to where it's going. And included in that is consuming or ingestion, chewing, which we forget to do sometimes, deglutition, swallowing. We do that unconsciously. Can you talk to somebody and eat food at the same time? Sometimes. Josh is a little on edge there on that. Yeah, that's when we get choked and it goes down the wrong tube and that kind of thing. But some people are more coordinated than others. But we don't have to consciously think about swallowing most of the time, do we? Now, if it's peanut butter, we make ourselves swallow 3 or 4 times to try to get it going. But there are food substances like that. And of course, the peristalsis segmentation in that as well. Secretion includes all the enzymes and secretions that's going to go into this process. Digestion is the breakdown of it, which we said some things start, carbohydrates start in the mouth, we continue in the stomach. The main stomach question would be, where does protein digestion begin? And that's in the stomach. Where's everything finished? In the small intestine. Absorption, that's going to be small intestine. Storage and eliminations, large intestine. And then they list also an immune barrier with some tight junctions of columnar epithelium. Here's the pathway of food on 614. Oral cavity, larynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. Accessory digestive organs. And I don't know if my new revamp test has this on there or not, but I used to ask, what are the accessory digestive organs? Teeth, tongue, salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. And any component that's involved in some form of digestion, whether it's just making an enzyme or if it's actually absorbing and digesting, it is going to be in that category. Regulation of gastrointestinal tract. This is where we can reach back to our former knowledge of chapter 9. And I ask the question, if you're in a fight or flight, is your body worried about digesting? No, it's not. So digesting occurs upon parasympathetic responses. Your everyday, mundane, couch potato activity responses. It's not going to relate to sympathetic. Sympathetic shuts it down. So the summary at the very bottom of 615, digestive system is regulated extrinsically by the autonomic nervous system and endocrine system, and intrinsically by the enteric nervous system and various paracrine regulators. Now those are internal built-in regulators. It's going to do things right there on the spot. All right, where do you think the swallowing center would be? When in doubt, where's all the other centers? Well, yeah, I kind of led you astray on that, I guess, but we have the rhythmicity center, the cardiac control center. Yeah, it's a swallowing center too. The old medulla. All right, the stomach, they're talking about producing the chyme. We just covered that. Look on 618 and let's look at some of the cells involved and what's going on here. Number one, a mucous neck cell secretes mucus. Now, mucus is extremely important to be produced prior to sending food to the stomach. Here's an upfront question. At what point are you ready to digest? Is it at the point of consuming food? Or it could be as early as thinking about consuming food. In theory, as soon as you start telling yourself you're hungry, and you may not have known that until you look at your watch and say, oh my gosh, it's 12, I'm starving to death. That always comes right after that, you know. Or that you wasn't hungry at all, probably prior to looking at your watch. But at that point, you're thinking, what am I going to go eat? And eating seems to be a necessity for us these days, so you're thinking about all these different kinds of foods that you like, and then you settle on one, and man, that sounds good, right? What's your favorite food, Sharday?
I like all kinds of food.
She's not picky, is she? Curly, what's your favorite food?
I like everything.
Pizza.
Thank you.
I'll give you something.
Thank you, Josh. I was thinking Mexican right now myself, but I like chips and salsa. I'll put them out of business on chips and salsa. But, so you're thinking about pizza. They're thinking about anything. I mean, they saw roadkill, got hungry on the way in this morning.
I'm gonna be
Probably hit
digesting.
it themselves. Curly swerved, went off in the ditch, got that old skunk, and she's thinking, man, he could be pretty good if he was cooked right. So, are we salivating? Are we like Pavlov's dogs now? Yeah, we're primed and ready, and when we get there, and it takes a restaurant forever to bring us food, don't that drive you nuts? Because now your stomach's literally eating itself. You're so stinking hungry. That's a lot of mental prep, really, isn't it? But when food hits it, we've got a mucus lining around the stomach. We're protected. It gets down there, we inhale it, basically. We don't sit around and chew. Man, that was good. Ate the whole thing. That whole possum just gone, just like that. Skunk, in Curly's case, she has no sense of smell. So the parietal cells now secrete hydrochloric acid. And hydrochloric acid is a necessity in the stomach because we need that low acidity. And this is the only place we really deal with a lot of acid, is in the stomach. The chief or zymogenic cells secrete pepsinogen in an inactive form and becomes active pepsin in the presence of the hydrochloric acid. That's why we need it. Now, would you agree without the mucus lining the stomach that this could easily just start tearing into the stomach? And I mean, this acid's pretty wicked. It's 2. I mean, it don't seem huge, but when we're just talking about the pH scale, that's just 1 mark away from battery acid. And on the other end, we throw a lot of 3s down there by drinking orange juice and things like that. So, I mean, this is a pretty strong acid if you think about it. Seems like coming up as vomit, it burns the old esophagus a little, don't it? You never know somebody that threw up so much that they was literally hoarse the next day and couldn't even hardly talk, and their throat was killing them. You ever have it that bad?
When I get a migraine.
It could do it. If you ever get it under control, then you can stop. But until then, it's just constant and it burns. So this is some serious acid. Then the enterochromaffin-like cells found in the stomach and intestine, which secrete histamine, are paracrine regulators of the GI tract. Well, histamine is an inflammatory response. G cells, which secrete hormone gastrin into the blood. Gastrin now is going to promote the small intestine to get ready. Here it comes. We've done all we can do here. Here comes some stuff, small intestine. And then D cells secrete the hormone somatostatin. And both of these, G cells and D cells, somatostatin and gastrin, really not only prepares the small intestine, but a message is sent to the pancreas to fire off some enzyme. The pancreas produces an enzyme for nearly every type of food we eat, and that's the exocrine portion of the pancreas. It has something for everything. All right, now, over on 619, the high concentration of hydrochloric acid in parietal cells makes gastric acid with a pH of less than 2, and that range is 1.5 to 2.5. Ingested proteins are denatured because of this pH. Under acidic conditions, weak pepsinogen enzymes partially digest each other, and this frees the fully active pepsin enzymes as small inhibitory fragments are removed. And number 3, pepsin is more active under acidic conditions, and a pH optimum of 2 is when it works its best. So we've covered digestion and absorption in the stomach. We know there's only 3 things we're going to absorb. Digestion is primarily proteins. We continue a little bit of carbohydrates. Then they talk about gastritis and peptic ulcers. Peptic ulcers are in reference to ulcers. For some reason, we're not producing enough mucus and the acid is beginning to eat into the walls of the stomach, creating pain, ulcers, in some cases bleeding. A lot of these ulcers are caused by infections, and the bacteria that's caught up in this is called Helicobacter pylori. We've discovered it to be fairly easy to treat. Years ago, bleeding ulcers was treated with surgery. We went in, cauterized, sealed, whatever we had to do to stop the bleeding. Several $1,000s later, we may or may not have fixed you because we fixed the obvious, but we may not have fixed the original cause. And then we noticed that pigs had a lot of the same problem. Makes us think we eat like pigs sometimes. Curly and Chardonnay worry me about eating a little bit of everything. That's what pigs do. I can't say I'm any different because there's not much I don't eat out there. So now, if we're throwing all this stuff in there, and the pH is optimum of 2, and we don't have any protection, and the acid starts eating on this stomach, then we get these ulcers or this infection, this Helicobacter pylori. What they found in pigs with veterinarians is that they could treat this with a $5 antibiotic. They might charge you $20 to look at the pig. $5 antibiotic, which the same antibiotic for us would be $50 probably, it's still amoxicillin. And give him some Pepto-Bismol. How about that? Now, how was we treating it? $5,000 later, surgery, we may or may not have fixed it. Now, what if the vet told the farmer, I can fix this pig, but we're gonna have to do surgery, you're gonna have to leave him overnight. We won't charge, but $750. What's a farmer gonna do?
Shoot it.
Yeah, let's eat this pig. I didn't like this pig to start with. Our attitude toward this pig changes really fast. But when it comes to human life, we don't really have that option legally. We might in a few years with Obamacare now. I think we'll have that choice. But needless to say, we spend the money because we value our life over that of a pig or any other animal. Our life should value higher. And I think the healthcare system has kind of taken advantage of that, knowing we'll pay whatever price, and we will. So let's charge more, and everything is more expensive, so that makes things go up, and so it's gone out of control at this point. All right, so they mentioned the Helicobacter pylori. It's very common. There was a, I wish I'd remembered this study. I read things and can't remember. I need to write things down, I guess. But there was a weird study one time that was done. See if I can remember all of it. At one time, a very high percentage, and for some reason 60% wants to stick in my head, 60% of the population that was studied, which was a huge population, had Helicobacter pylori in their system. Now they were completely healthy, but they had this in their system. And now there's only like 15% of the population because we know how to kill it. And all these different antibiotics we take for everything else, a lot of them will affect it and kill it as well. But what they did is link that study to an enzyme that Helicobacter pylori actually was directly or indirectly causing, which reduced obesity. It was connected to obesity before they got finished with the study. Lack of Helicobacter pylori in the system as a norm of flora that's under control reduces this enzyme, which gives us a greater ability to digest and I guess burn fat even maybe. Now it's causing more obesity in society. Now I don't know how true the study was, but I thought it was quite interesting. Back in our parents' and grandparents' day, Helicobacter, this is a major breakthrough. We found what's causing your ulcers besides your wife and children. I mean your husband and children. Either way, it's possible. There is something else out there. They talk on 621 about different medications that we use in the gastrointestinal tract, such as they talk about treated medically with a drug regimen that consists of a protein pump inhibitor, which Prilosec, is that the little purple pill?
Mm-hmm.
Combined with two different antibiotics, amoxicillin and clarithromycin, to suppress Helicobacter pylori infection. You go down a little below that, and then it talks about acid can leak through the mucosa to the submucosa, causing direct damage, and this is some of the inflammation that's going to be caused. The histamine released from mast cells during inflammation may stimulate further acid secretion. So a lot of your drugs, such as Tagamet and Zantac, they're what's called type 2 histamine blockers, or histamine type 2 blockers. So what they're doing is blocking the extra histamine here that the mast cells are producing, which would decrease further acid secretion. Now, that same histamine, let's say for instance, maybe we already covered this. Yes. It could be used for that in theory. if you don't have anything else, what do you got to lose? Some stomach acid. So there you go. People with gastritis and peptic ulcers should avoid substances that stimulate acid secretion, including coffee and alcohol, and must often take these antacids. Any of y'all take a lot of antacids? You really shouldn't at y'all's age, but you know, the people I see that they carry Rolaids in their pocket or whatever are the coffee drinkers. They're really diehard coffee. We're talking, they've got one in their hand 24/7. They can't make it without it. Because coffee itself is a little bit acidic, and there's not really anything to digest when it gets down there, but the stomach thinks there is, so it creates more acidity. And it really turns up a pretty strong stomach there with nothing to digest in there. Now, if you throw food in there, you're going to reduce all those problems even more. But to some people, I literally think coffee is a food to them. It's such a stimulant that it just keeps the old system metabolizing, and I don't see them really eating a whole lot. Throw a donut down every now and then. That'd just be police officers, though, wouldn't it? All right, small intestine, we know they list about 12 feet here. We know what's going on there with villi and microvilli increasing surface area. Now on 622, they mentioned that foldings in here, microvilli are formed by foldings at the apical surface of the epithelial cell membrane. A light microscope, in a light microscope, the microvilli produce a somewhat vague brush border on the edges of the columnar epithelial cells. The term brush border and microvilli are used interchangeably. You will see the term brush border on the test, and that's the same as microvilli. Intestinal contractions and motility, we know it's peristalsis above the stomach, below the stomach segmentation. And they're very, very slow. We know it's a smooth muscle, so it's extremely slow in its processing. Moving to 625, we have haustra or pouches in the large intestine. Large intestine is a little more large, flexible, not so much stretchable, but it does expand quite a bit for storage of waste. And so we can store quite a bit there before defecation begins. But if these things, these haustra or pouches, become inflamed and really enlarged, then it could lead into something they call diverticulitis. And what I understand, that is extremely painful. And then there's other things that can actually cause diverticulitis. It's long-term diseases such as Crohn's disease. If you've ever dealt with Crohn's disease or know somebody that has, this is just a really slow, long-term, debilitating disease that there is no cure for. And we really don't know really what causes it. That's the bad thing. I did run across a theory one time. In fact, it was a guest speaker we had on campus that he lived in Idaville, and his granddaughter was going to school here at the time, but he had been a research scientist his whole life. Did most of his research out of his own home, had sold several research products to different companies to be produced, and at this time he had developed a cancer, not preventing, but cancer diagnosis kit. A lot of intestinal cancer in large intestine places, there'll be blood in the stool. Maybe sometimes such a minimum amount that you can't see it with a visual eye. Well, he created a product that you could throw in the stool, and it would light up like a neon sign if it was blood in it. Now, is that a sign you have cancer? No. What if your hemorrhoids are acting up? You know, older people have a lot of hemorrhoids too, so your hemorrhoids can be acting up. It's not a sign of cancer, but if there's other things that you know is not just right, and then we light it up, then that's a sign to go check it out. See, it's kind of an early diagnosis process. He had a theory on Crohn's, and he spoke quite a bit on Crohn's. His theory on Crohn's, from what research he had studied and been involved in, is that the bacterial infection that causes Crohn's ends up just hanging in there and hardening these intestinal walls and creating abscesses. I mean, it's a constant problem. This bacteria, combinations of bacteria, is almost identical to that in dog saliva. And he personally had connected some cases of Crohn's to people that their whole life had little dogs living in the house with them. And as kids, these little dogs come up, they want to lick you in the face every time, don't they? And he said, I'm just saying, I can't actually prove it or put my finger on it at this point, but I've got enough evidence to convince me I don't want to kiss a dog. And he said, if you have small children, I wouldn't let that dog ever kiss them in the face. And it could even set in on adults for whatever reason. So it's some combination, weird, you know, you'd think we have researched a little better now. There's a whole regimen of drugs they can use now, but most of it, they literally reference it to be somewhat of an autoimmune disease, because the way we treat it is with steroids. We lower your immunity so it don't inflame up so much, and gradually take you off prednisone, and you have a pretty good time frame, and then it flares up again, and then here we go again, and we just treat symptoms at that time. We hadn't fixed anything. And then a lot of people end up with no intestine before it's over, because this part now has hardened to the point they've actually had to take chisels in and chisel some out. It's gotten so hard and non-functional. Cut abscesses out to clean the mess up. They may take a foot, 2 foot. You only have so much. You can only do that so many times. It's a horrible disease. And they list it on 627, inflammatory bowel disease involving Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Colon cancer is not a good sign either, and that's what his research and study was on, to try to find an early detection process at home. So it would encourage you to go to the doctor and test it further. Catching it sooner gives you a greater chance of survival in any form of cancer. Fluid and electrolyte absorption in the intestine. A person may drink only about 1.5 liters of water a day. The small intestine receives 7 to 9 liters of water a day. That's about what we're supposed to excrete, isn't it? 1.5 liters. I think that's what the last chapter said. So basically what we're drinking is what we're excreting. What happens the rest of it? Absorbed. Small intestine absorbs it. And what it doesn't, I mean, it gets most of it here. It might leave, it gets 90%. It leaves 1 to 2 liters, 1.5 to 2 liters. Large intestine gets that. So, and of course, we're on our way out here with defecation. And, you know, we get in our everyday, mundane activity set schedule. Don't you hate to screw up a good schedule? Everything's working out for you, and then just something goes AWOL and just messes up the whole schedule. Some people hate to go on vacation because it messes up the schedule, messes up their digestive system, and they come back constipated because nothing's working out, or nothing's coming out, I'm not sure what. But it becomes a habit. That's what we get used to. We get set in patterns. It gets worse with age, I'm telling you. Y'all are way more flexible than I am at this point. 628, looking at liver. Liver's made of single layered hepatocytes. So this liver's made of layer after layer after layer after layer after layer. And in between these layers are sinusoids that have huge blood supply into this liver. These, of course, we know liver produces a ton of proteins. It breaks down red blood cells. It detoxifies waste. It stores glucose. And this is a serious organ. You look at it and say, well, it's an ugly organ. Well, it may be, but it's a serious organ. It is an organ, though. We can cut part of it off and it'll regenerate itself, and that's pretty cool. But it's an organ, once it quits functioning, you're pretty much dead too. That's how much it does. It's the only organ of the body that has a vein coming into it and a vein going out of it. You know, the veins are just supposed to go away. Veins away. It should have an artery coming to it, but it doesn't. It has the mesenteric artery mesenteric veins, coming from the intestine to the liver, and that's for storage of extra glucose. And then it has the hepatic vein leading away from it. Now, if we'd been, let's say we've been fasting, we hadn't eaten in quite a while, which vein would have the most glucose in it? The mesenteric vein coming to the liver, or the hepatic vein leading out of the liver? Hepatic, because we're using stored glucose from the liver. So just after a meal, a few hours after a meal, now which one has the most glucose in it? The mesenteric, going to the liver for storage, the extra. Look over on 631 and let's figure out some of this stuff that the liver does. You ever seen a jaundiced baby? Maybe your parents told you when you were born you were yellow around the gills and looked a little jaundiced, and still look like that today. Who knows? Any of yours jaundiced? Both jaundiced? They didn't come premature though, did they?
3 weeks.
3 weeks? Yeah. Not bad, but any little bit of prematurity, we usually kick in a little bit of jaundice. Jaundice can be bad, but it's easily dealt with. The system's just not ready to take care of all the red blood cells that we had in fetal circulation, and now we've jumped into adult circulation. So, bile pigment or bilirubin, that's the other term, Curly. This is your other son's name, bilirubin. We've got bradykinin and bilirubin. Is that not a southern name for some boy from Mississippi or now Oklahoma? Because Curly's going to have a kid one of these days from Oklahoma named bilirubin. Well, have you predicted your last name at this point?
No.
No? Okay. So, no hope there. So it's going to be a while before I read this baby's name in the paper. When I read this in the paper and I see bilirubin, I'm going to think Curly. You're going to do this for me, right, Curly?
Yeah.
All right. Y'all heard that. I've got it documented. We're going to have a bilirubin something one of these days. And you know, this could even be a girl's name in today's time. Now, Ron, you're not agreeing with me. You give me a kind of a weird look there.
If you want her to be a nun.
Well,
Isn't that every father's dream?
yeah.
Yes.
Kind of, to an extent, I guess. Well, there's some girls' names out there that are sure enough boys' names. Would you agree? I was talking to a guy one time, and I had seen his name and another man's name where they had actually come to my cow cell, and I said, I saw where you and your brother was at my cell. He said, that's my wife. So I stuck my foot in my mouth, and it was every bit of a boy's name I ever heard of in my life. It was Joe, Charlie, Fred, you know, it was a boy's name. That's my wife. I don't guess he'll ever come back again. I stuck my foot in my mouth, but it happened. So bilirubin Sue, it doesn't matter. So bilirubin, we got a bradykinin. That Chardonnay is going to do bradykinin, and then bilirubin. Then the bravest one will do juxtaglomerular. So there's baby names throughout physiology, in case y'all did not know that. So bilirubin is produced in the spleen, liver, and bone marrow as derivative of hemigroups. So bilirubin is a byproduct of breaking down red blood cells. That's what it is. So we got this free bilirubin. It's not water soluble, and thus most is carried in the blood attached to albumin protein. So it don't like to mix with water. We're cruising around on proteins. And this protein-bound bilirubin can neither be filtered by the kidneys into the urine nor directly excreted by the liver into the bile. What the Sam Hill are we going to do with it? Well, it keeps circulating. So the liver can take some of the free bilirubin out of the blood and conjugate it. So it mixes it with a glucuronic acid, and now it's considered conjugated bilirubin. And now it's water soluble. So it mixes it with an acid, makes it water soluble, and now it can be secreted into the bile. So we basically took old wore out red blood cells, recycled it into something now we can use. Now bile is going to be used in the digestive process to help break down fats or emulsify fats. So once bile is conjugated, it enters the intestine where it's converted by bacteria into another pigment called urobilinogen. Derivatives of urobilinogen impart a brown color to the feces. About 30 to 50% of the urobilinogen is absorbed by the intestine and enters the hepatic portal vein. But urobilinogen is also filtered by the kidneys and gives your urine an amber color. So when we're done with it, we send a little bit through the kidney, we send a little bit into the intestine, and we just make things more colorful. Bottom line. Bile acids are derivatives of cholesterol, so that's, I combine that into some kind of test question there. Bile salts is another way to look at that. Bile salts, they're derivatives of cholesterol. All right, jaundice is talked about more on 632. Detoxification of the blood. This deals with Kupffer cells in the liver and toxic. We take uric acid and ammonia and break it down to the less toxic urea, and it'll circulate in the bloodstream and be used for hypertonicity between the interstitial cells and blood. And again, anything in excess, we'll get rid of it through the kidney, like we talked about the other day. And that takes us over to 633. And I think that's probably a spot we ought to stop right there. Yeah, we'll finish this up Friday easy enough. So we'll stop right there. We did pretty good covering that. Sum up the rest of it on Friday. Y'all will have a wonderful weekend, I'm sure. I'll see you back here Friday to give you a little tour.